Hey guys, it's Raz. All right, so now that we have had a chance to look at all of these different kind of climate driving phenomena, we're going to jump into El Nino and La Nina. Now, you've probably heard these terms before because they come up as we talk about weather. But basically, what they are, or what kind of the big term is El Nino Southern Oscillation, so an ENSO pattern. And I just want to emphasize here that notice that this is a pattern. So what we do is we go back and forth between El Nino and La Nina conditions, and we also have kind of neutral. And this isn't something that happens like with the flip of a switch. If you look at kind of this graph, many of these like take place over years. So this is something that you have like building and peaking, and then kind of winding back down. So it's not like we all of a sudden one day wake up and it's El Nino. Like we can kind of sense these trends occurring. So just be aware of that. It's an oscillation. It's just back and forth. It's a gradual shift. Now, what is it? Before we jump in, let's talk about normally. So normally what occurs in a normal year is our trade winds. Side note, this is always along the equator. So when we're talking about this, we're going to focus mostly on the western coast of South America, and then kind of the eastern coast of Australia and like some of Southeast Asia, because those are the ones that are mostly affected by it. I'll preface by saying there's more global impacts to this. We'll talk about those in class later, but for now, we're going to stick to just kind of this area. So anyways, normally the trade winds are blowing along the equator from east to west. And as they do that, they're blowing kind of warmer surface water over towards Southeast Asia and Australia. And as we just learned, when you blow that surface water away, you allow for upwelling, for some of that deep, cool water to rise to the surface. So that means that over along the coast of South America, we have kind of cooler temperature, but really good fisheries, right? Remember that cold water carries lots of oxygen, brings up nutrients and sediment from the bottom of the ocean. We're doing great there. Lots of good fishing. Now, on the other side of things, we have a warmer climate over in Southeast Asia and Australia. And we've also set up a system where we've got kind of a low pressure system. Low pressure is associated with rainier weather. So as that warmer kind of water warms the air, that air rises, we get rainier conditions in Australia and Southeast Asia, and we get kind of drier conditions over in South America. Now, I always sort of think like normally, if I picture Southeast Asia, I picture like super wet kind of monsoony type conditions, right? I'm picturing people in like rice paddies and like lots of water. That's kind of what comes to my brain. And in South America, I typically think of like llamas and like up in the mountains and like drier conditions. So kind of keep that in your head if that helps. Now, in an El Nino event, basically what happens is at first the trade winds will weaken and then they will eventually reverse. So they'll go from blowing from east to west, and now they're blowing from west to east. As that happens, we have that warmer than normal air or water being pushed up against South America. So if that's happening, we're not getting upwelling. That means that those fisheries off the coast of South America decrease pretty drastically, and they'll see an economic impact from that. They're not going to be pulling the same amount out that they were. We also end up with warmer, wetter conditions in South America than we would normally have. Now, the opposite happens in Australia. Australia is getting, and Southeast Asia, is getting some of that cooler water. So they're getting cooler, drier conditions. They're also getting some upwelling there, right? So they may see different fishing, but it's much drier. So we have kind of a flip-flop of what's going on in terms of precipitation, temperature, climate in general. That would be El Nino. Now, La Nina, I always kind of think of La Nina as just like normal conditions, but magnified. So with La Nina, the trade winds are kind of blowing normally east to west, but they are intense. They're strong. So it's pushing that cool water even further. We have like way beyond normal fishing capacity. Like they're doing great, right? But it tends to be much cooler and drier than normal. Now, in some cases, we could even enter drought-like conditions in some of those areas. Now, the opposite happens in Southeast Asia and Australia. Normally, they're warm and wet, right? In this case, they are much warmer, and we've got like monsoon level rains, like lots of rains, potential for some pretty devastating flooding, and that sort of thing. So it's kind of, again, normal year, but amplified. So just to kind of put into perspective, right? When we're dealing with El Nino, we have less upwelling in South America, and we have less productive fisheries. We also typically have a warmer winter in much of North America because, again, well, we'll get into that. We also are going to see increased precipitation and flooding in the Americas. And again, we'll get into that. And we see the opposite happen on the other side. We see droughts in Southeast Asia and Australia. We see weakened monsoon activity. We also, interestingly enough, will see decreased hurricane activity in the Atlantic Ocean. And we'll talk about why in class. I don't want to give that away yet. We also have La Nina events, right? The opposite of El Nino. In this case, stronger upwelling, better fisheries in South America, cooler, drier weather in the Americas. We get, rainier, warmer weather in Southeast Asia. And again, we also see during La Ninas increase in tornado activity and hurricane activity in the Atlantic. So currently right now, if you do a little look-see, we're in a La Nina pattern. So this is what we're dealing with now. And I can show you some of those images in class, but we are currently in La Nina. So this section, you do have a practice FRQ. I want you to think of 2 environmental problems related to the conditions of an El Nino event, and those can be anywhere that you can think of. We will talk about this one in class, so go ahead and get your right on, and I will talk to you later.